Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Authortunities. And today we are with Rebecca Treasure from Apex, and she's going to tell us all her secrets and all the Apex secrets. But the first thing that we want to know is, Rebecca, what is the number one thing you wish writers knew when submitting to Apex? Like, what is that thing that you're like, oh, this is the secret of success?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk about Apex and my work with them. I love what I do, and I love getting to talk about it. And man, if there was a secret sauce, this gig would be so much easier, right? Like, it would be so nice if it was just like, if you just do this one thing, you're covered. But it's really not that simple. But I would say the primary thing that I wish all writers knew about submitting really to any publication is read the submission guidelines thoroughly. We get a lot of stories that are outside word count. We get stories, on the flash fiction side that aren't written to theme, even though it's a themed contest and you have to check a box that says that you understand it's a themed contest. We still get stories every month that aren't written to theme. We don't have super strict formatting guidelines or anything like that, but just understanding what the market is looking for, on a very dot the I and cross the T level is the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the second thing that I wish writers knew about submitting to, again, really any market, but Apex is where I'm at, is that if you aren't reading the market, then you are giving yourself more of an uphill battle to succeeding in submitting and selling to that market. Because if you're sending us a secondary world fantasy, that's going to have a really hard time finding a home at Apex. But if you've never read it and you just see that we accept fantasy and you yeet yourself, your secondary world fantasy at us, it's going to get rejected. And that has nothing to do with the quality of the story, but the fit of the market. And so making sure that you understand what the markets that you're submitting to are looking for. And the best way to do that is by reading them and supporting them.
Wow, really good advice. And I agree with you. So what you're saying is read the submission guidelines and know your markets. And those are the two probably easiest things that writers can do.
Yep.
And I'm going to say the hardest, it seems like.
Especially the second one seems to be really difficult for some writers. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. That is your tip. And now we're going to get into the rest of the secrets, the really juicy stuff about Apex and Rebecca Treasure herself.
Grab some paper, grab your pen, open Authortunities, and you can begin. When you exercise your rights and get published, you may change. Write your own path, both wonderful and strange, with Authortunities.
So again, thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. Can you tell me a little bit about Apex? I mean, you guys have a great history and a great reputation. Can you tell everybody about where did Apex come from?
So Apex is the brainchild and passion project of Jason Sizemore, who started, I opened the website because I always forget the exact year, 2011, maybe. It's been around. I think they're coming up on, I think next year might be 20 years, so that make it, a little bit later than that, 2015, but or 2005 rather. See, math. I'm not here to math. I'm here to do editing. So
I do not judge on numbers.
Ages, yes. So Apex has been around for ages, and it's gone through a number of editors in chief over the years, but it's always had this focus on, and on our tagline, I think, is a really good summary of what we do. And I always point that out. And that's strange, surreal, shocking, and beautiful. And that's really what Apex is looking to do. We're looking for fiction that makes you think and feel and maybe a little bit uncomfortable. And I think some of our most, famous and successful pieces really sum up all four of those bits of our tagline. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you guys do it perfectly. You do it absolutely perfectly.
Leslie and Jason have such a keen eye for great stories. And, Leslie Connor took over as the editor-in-chief about a year ago. And, just the stories that she and I have been collaborating on are just incredible pieces of fiction. I'm so lucky to get to work with them.
Yeah, and so that's my next question is, how did you start working with them? What does your history start with Apex?
Sure. So I started volunteering with them as a slush reader during COVID in 2020. And then they were looking for assistant managers. I think it was May of 2021. And I applied for the position because I was looking for part-time work. And Jason gave me the chance. And I think one of the things that got me the job was he kept being like, are you familiar with Patreon? And I'd be like, no, but I'm willing to learn. And he'd say, well, can you do Excel? And I'd be like, oh, a little bit, but I'm willing to work on that and learn. And I think that one of the things that got me the position was that I was like, no, but I'm game. I'll go for it. And I think that helped. And then I just dove right in, like, to the Patreon and everything else, and worked my way up. And then when we added flash fiction during our 2023 Kickstarter, Jason moved me into that position as the flash editor. And then last summer I got bumped into the managing editor position when Leslie got bumped up to editor in chief. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Lucky and worked hard, and it's just kind of come together beautifully.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I'm going to say that's a tip, I think, to get in with these magazines is participate in the magazine. Is I think everybody's looking for slush readers.
Yes,
and that is a great way to get in there, and also be familiar with the magazine, familiar with your own work, so you can, we don't want to compare, but you can be like, oh, a lot of the successful people are doing this. I'm going to start doing that. Formatting,
yes,
is like a big part of that.
You wouldn't think something like formatting would be such a flag, but it's very rare that the stories that are most successful don't follow standard manuscript formatting. And it's not that doing that somehow magically makes you a better writer. It's that the longer you're in the field, the more practice and effort and study you've put into your craft, the more likely you are to be adhering to industry guidelines. And so it's not a one-to-one correlation, but there is a strong correlation there.
Yeah. Which brings me to best practices. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you guys do the Shun formatting necessarily very strictly, but to me, that's one of them, is at least have it in like a readable font.
Yes.
What are some of the best practices you guys look for at Apex?
I mean, we read the submission guidelines. We do ask for Shun, but we're not going to reject you if it's not exactly, Shun manuscript formatting. We're not super sticklers on grammar. We do go through developmental and copy editing passes with the authors. And so, treat your manuscript with respect. If it's riddled with typos, it's just showing, again, a lack of care. And it's unlikely that a manuscript riddled with typos is going to be of the quality that's going to make it to Leslie's desk anyway. And then the biggest thing is, honestly, read the magazine, because quite often what we're passing on at the higher level are stories that are good but aren't a fit. And so this author has waited 4-6 months for a response on a story that was never going to sell to Apex, in the first place, because it just wasn't a fit for what we're trying to do. That being said, I also am a writer, and I'm also a big fan of don't self-reject. And if you think you can kind of squint and see surreal or shocking in it, like, send us the piece, let us decide. But being familiar with the markets that you're submitting to, reading Apex, reading the stories that are kind of our touchstone pieces. These are good practices to make sure that you understand what Apex is looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I like how you touch upon, it can be a good story. Because it gets rejected is not a judgment of you as a person or your work in general. It a lot of times just isn't a good fit, or it could be it's a perfect fit, but there's 3 of them. The call was for vampires, and there's 3 vampire stories that are very similar, and so you got to pick one, which on a side note, on a side note, how important do you think it is as a best practice for writers to have a platform? Like, do you guys pay attention to that? Or I know some places will actually check and see, of those 3, this person really has a very big platform, and this person do you guys ever pay attention to that? Or
not at the final level? At the final level, when Leslie and I are discussing stories, it doesn't matter if it's somebody that we've published a dozen times or has 6 nebulas, or if it's somebody that we've never heard of. That at the end, it's always going to be the story. But there are some authors that, we're very familiar with that we know that Leslie and Jason get really excited about, and they are going to move through the pipeline from the first round to that Leslie's round a little bit quicker, just because we're going to go, okay, Leslie loves Rich Larson. We understand that she's probably going to want to see this story. Even if she ends up passing on it, we've published Rich Larson so many times that she's going to want to give him that directly, not have it be a first round rejection. So yes, but no, it's not, having a platform is not going to impact whether or not you sell to Apex, but it might impact your wait time.
Yeah. Which is also good.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just, it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, well, because publishing is a business, and I think that's sometimes what we forget. Writing is a business as well. Sometimes, and we forget that we have to have both hats on.
Yep, it's tough.
Yeah. Well, what about what's coming up? Can you give us any hints for what Apex is coming up with next or doing?
Yes, actually, this is really well timed because we have a Kickstarter launching next Tuesday,
awesome.
the 9th. So you can find it on Kickstarter under Apex Publications, Apex Magazine 2025. And we would love to have your support. It's the amount of funding we get is directly going to be tied to how many issues we publish next year. So if we only fund 2 issues, we become a biannual publication. If we fund 3 issues, then it's triannual, and so on. And so we really hope to fully fund and continue to be able to be bi-monthly, but money is tight for small presses across the board. It is really hard to get enough money to do all of the things that make a successful small press a magazine run, and to be able to pay authors even a fraction of what they deserve, honestly.
Yeah.
And so, we're running that Kickstarter, and we're trying to come up with some really good and creative add-ons and rewards for our backers, exclusive stories, some really neat critique ideas. So I hope to be able to have good news on that in a month or so. But that's next Tuesday, July 9th is when we launch.
Awesome. Well, that link is in the descriptions to support that Kickstarter, which kind of brings me to my next question. This has been a great interview, Rebecca, because you're just following through with all the things I want to ask next. That is, my next question is, how can we as writers support small press? Because it is not easy being a writer, but it's also not easy being small press. No. What are some of the things we writers can do besides clicking in the link below to support Apex's Kickstarter?
Please. So I think that financially supporting them obviously is the front line. There is very little money in publishing. Even though it's technically a paid position, I'm not exactly rolling in dough. There's just not a lot of money, and the focus, at least at Apex, and I'm certain most other, small magazine, is always going to be on the authors and the readers. And so, we pour money into making sure we have great cover art and, an up-to-date and respectable website, so that the author's work is being shown and showcased in an appropriate manner, and paying, that professional rate. And so it's just really expensive, frankly. And so if you can, and you're in a position to financially support Apex and other magazines, please, please, please do so. Many of us have Patreons. Apex has a Patreon where you get exclusive access to all sorts of interviews and critique opportunities and events. And we have a very active Discord that you can join through that Patreon. You can subscribe directly through the website. And I think most magazines are going to have at least those 2 options in the contemporary world. Most places have a Patreon or some kind of, crowdfunding group support, and then you can always subscribe directly. And if you can't do that, money is tight all around. The economy and the world, frankly, are kind of smoldering. So if you can't support them financially, supporting them on social media can be really, really helpful in spreading the word to try to get to readers that they haven't found yet that might be able to help them out financially, and just, getting the stories as many eyeballs as possible, because as writers, that's what we want. We want readers. And so if you can help find them more readers, that's a way of supporting too.
Awesome. Yeah, those shares and reviews are currency, just as valuable as, priceless, I'd say, because you really can't buy them.
Yeah, you literally cannot buy reviews. So if you can leave them, that's very, very helpful.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Now I want to know a little bit about Rebecca yourself, and where can we find you, and what do you as the author have?
So you can find me online at RebeccaETreasure.com. I'm assuming that the link will be included. And you can find a list of all the short stories that I've published, and some other interviews and essays that I have out there on the internet. I write speculative fiction in all the flavors, is how I put it. I think a lot about how we relate to society and what the pressures of society do to us. I'm an anthropologist and a historian by training, so I think about those filters quite a lot, the way that we view the world and what makes that innate and where it becomes less innate and more subjective to the culture or the place that we grew up or live. And Yeah, so I've been really lucky to have a number of short stories published out there. So you can find those all on my website and read more about what I have to think about that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Is there any place else that we can find Apex? So the main link will be in the description. We know about the Patreon, which I'll put in the description, but is there any place else that we haven't mentioned?
Sure. So the Patreon is a great place to find us, the website, which is apex-magazine.com. And then we also have a YouTube channel where we do the Snap Judgment critique workshop, basically every 3 months. It's organized by my co-editor Marissa Van Uden, and we always bring in a guest editor and we critique the first page of submissions. And the idea is you put your hand up when as an editor you'd stop reading, and my caveat is always I would never stop reading that fast. I always give a story more grace than the first page. But the idea is to say this is where editors are stumbling in these openings and what we're looking for and seeing. And so if you go to our YouTube, you can watch all of the old ones. I think that we're on episode 11. And our next episode is going to be airing August 1st. So yeah, that's going to be a really, really good one. So.
Oh, I am so glad I asked that question because I need to start putting that in Authortunities because that's what it is. It's all the great author universe things that are out there, and I need to start watching that.
No, it's awesome. A great resource. I loved watching it before I, started being on the panel, and I love listening to the new, the guest editors, because Leslie and I are fairly in tune, but they always have these great new insights and that we learn. So our next guest is Vaidya Chandrasekera, which I'm sure I said wrong, but that's our next guest editor. And so that's going to be a really cool episode on August 1st.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And it's important to remember as the editor is reading your piece, the editor is thinking about the reader reading the piece. So if the editor's not interested, they know the reader's not interested and be better.
That's why it's important to read slush, I think.
It is.
You start to see like, oh, I don't have anything against this author and I don't have anything against this story. There's some good things in almost every story I've ever read. Yeah. But when you have 1,500 stories to read every month, you just have to go, no, it's not quite there. And you have to move on. It's, the business side of it, which can be hard. And I know that as a writer, sometimes those rejections hurt so bad, but it's just kind of the other side of the coin.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because we're competing with readers, like there's all the stories, there's more than 1,500 stories that your story is competing with in that magazine. So
Yep. Exactly.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a genuine pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
This is Rebecca E. Treasure with Apex and all the secrets that we need to know.
Thank you.
Grab some paper, grab your pen, open opportunities, and you can begin. When you exercise your rights and get published, you may change. Write your own path, both wonderful and strange, with opportunities.